Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for August 4th, 2021. I want to begin with an update from the story yesterday on housing, as there are new figures and new developments in the case. The Congress allowed the eviction moratorium to go out of existence by not acting, which threatened 7.4 million renters with immediate eviction proceedings, as they were no longer protected by this rule that was promoted by this, or pushed by the Centers for Disease Control, which allowed for people to remain in apartments even if they're behind in rent during the corona crisis. Now, that expired on August 3rd. The Congress did not act, and so President Biden, under enormous pressure, issued an extension till October 3rd. Now, this extension will not solve the problem, and here's essentially the problem. As part of the Great Reset, there's a commitment to ending home ownership in the United States. The idea is that it ties up too much money in mortgages and things of that sort that could be used for other activities, namely speculation. And what we're seeing is a drive by huge financial firms such as BlackRock and Vanguard to use the almost free money they're getting from the Federal Reserve to purchase homes at above cost, above property valuation, to, in a sense, rescue many people who are in over their heads, but also to make offers that they can't refuse. And then buying up whole blocks of cities and then turning them over to their own corporate entities as rental properties. And of course, the rents are going to be sky high. So what we're seeing is people selling homes at prices above their valuation. Those people will not be able to replace those homes with the price of homes going up continuously. They'll be forced to rent, and because the rental costs are continuing to rise. Now, what happens then is the corporate landlords will literally have complete control over people. In a sense, it will be a return to feudalism. And the existing landlords, many people buy rental properties for the purposes of an investment. They're not getting paid because of the moratorium. They're going to end up in foreclosure. And so we have a situation where you have two processes coming together. One is the overall decline of income, the decline of resources for the middle class. At the same time, a consolidation of housing and other resources in the hands of speculative financial interests. Now, one of the consequences of this is the U.S. Census is reporting that there are about 15 million vacant homes in the United States. So as we have a homeless crisis, we have homes sitting there idle that are eventually going to be either deteriorated and torn down, or will become part of the high rental income for the corporate landlords that buy them. The real problem is not housing per se. It's the consolidation of credit in the hands of these speculative firms such as BlackRock, Vanguard, the too big to fail banks that have no interest in whether people have good housing or not. Their only interest is the bottom line, their profits. And they're supported by a financial system which is increasingly dependent on fresh flows of liquidity from the central banks, who in turn are moving to take dictatorial control over spending policy so that nations will not invest in infrastructure, will not invest in job production, will not have credit available for entrepreneurs and producers, but instead more funds flowing into the speculative bubbles. Now, in the short term, if you're a stockholder and your stocks are going up, that seems good. For the country's future, it's a disaster. And that's why we will be taking up on August 14th, the Schiller Institute will have a conference on the 50 years of the shift to a speculative economy. that Lyndon LaRouche warned about and consistently offered an alternative to. Now, let's take up the Green New Deal, because there's some new developments on this. The Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz, made a very strong statement in the last days. He said it would be totally wrong to believe that we could save the climate by asceticism, in other words, by austerity. The only right approach is to rely on innovation and technology. I do not share at all the view that our direction should be going back to the Stone Age. Now, this is an important attack on the European Union policy, which is the net carbon zero policy, which is the exit from nuclear, exit from coal, and the reliance on so-called sustainable energy resources, which are not sustainable, which are not efficient, that is solar and wind power. And this is the push coming from the globalists. The same ones supporting the Great Reset are behind the global Green New Deal. But as we've been reporting, this is in deep trouble. The latest development is that India did not join the climate talks in London last week, which may augur their rejection of the overall policy, especially the anti-coal policy, because India is very dependent on coal, and they're also moving into the nuclear age for electricity production. And it's likely that India will not participate in the November COP26 conference in Glasgow, Scotland. Now, the anti-coal policy is largely financed by, essentially Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York and billionaire, who has set up an organization to bribe mayors and bribe officials to get out of coal production, to shut down coal production. Now, Russia and China are likely to attend the Glasgow conference, but they're not going to give up on coal. They're highly dependent on electricity from coal and increasingly from nuclear. So what we're seeing is a rejection of the policies of the Green New Deal coming from major countries. And the whole premise of the Green New Deal is you can get the whole world to agree to commit suicide on behalf of the fallacious argument that carbon dioxide production is the cause of climate change. This was definitively refuted at a conference held by the Schiller Institute on July 24th, that the fallacy of man-made climate change was exposed and destroyed. And if you haven't seen it yet, you should go to the schillerinstitute.com and log on to that conference. It was July 24th, and it was a complete refutation of the arguments behind the Green New Deal. Now, if you put these two reports together, the Great Reset is not going to work, the Green New Deal is not going to work, and yet policy officials, governments, think tanks, academics are all pushing this at the same time. The likelihood is that it's not going to work. We need to have an alternative. And the only alternative that will work is the one that was presented consistently from the beginning of the 1970s by Lyndon LaRouche: economic investment in physical economy, with the emphasis on scientific and technological progress. The fact that individuals like the Chancellor of Austria are now coming around to this view, or if it's been his view all along, are now openly stating it, means that we have the possibility to win this fight. So don't give in to the climate crowd and the globalists. It's time to fight. The Schiller Institute and LaRouche Organization are leading that fight. I urge you to become members of the Schiller Institute. Sign up for our daily updates at the LaRouche Organization and share these videos and organize your friends and colleagues to go to our website to become informed about the alternatives to what otherwise is a devastating return to what Kurz correctly identified as a Stone Age. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back again tomorrow.